Hi guys, Dr. Zack Rourk here. Today I had the privilege of sitting down with Stewart. Drew is one of my favorite athletes. I've been training him since he was in Pee Wees, actually. Super talented kid on and off the ice. And what I thought was really cool about this conversation is we got to go a little bit into how his mind works and how he deals with challenges. And we got to talk about um, really the importance of not avoiding challenges and actually trying to take them on. So enjoy the listen. It was super fun for me. And a big thank you to Drew for coming on the podcast. Okay, Drew Stewart here on the PWHT podcast. Thank you for joining me, my friend. A little bit of background. Drew has been training here at PWHT since
Like second year Pee Wee, so like 7 years.
second year Pee Wee. And
Yeah.
actually, and I didn't even think about this, but one of my favorite stories is when we first met. So Jordy Murray and I went out to test the on ice speed of the Bantam AA
Yeah.
team, and you happened to be on the ice like just the practice
Right.
before,
Yeah.
and me and Jordy were watching the practice, and we were like, "Who is this kid?" And so we invited you to stay. You stay, you do all the skating tests, and as a second year Pee Wee,
Right.
you tested like I think either third or fourth fastest on the Bantam AA team, and I was
Yeah.
just like, holy smokes! So I think officially you're the youngest kid to start training with us.
I think so, especially at that time.
Yeah,
I came in and I was like, all these high school guys. It's a little intimidating.
that's funny. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll kind of run through like your hockey journey, right?
Yeah.
So we'll start with how you got into hockey. We'll talk about the different levels. We'll try to get into some challenges, how you dealt with things, that kind of stuff, and see where it goes. So I guess I'd start off with just how'd you get into hockey?
Well, my hockey started in Florida actually with my grandpa and my dad. They were both really into hockey, so we're always like watching hockey, watching highlights, stuff like that. And I kind of had like my little knee hockey stick and I'd run around the house and whatever. And then like I'd hear all the highlights. So like my first word was actually goal.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm just screaming goal around the house. I'm like, what's wrong with this kid? Like, might need to get him into hockey or something. So got me on skates and I started playing like mites and stuff there, a little bit more organized. And then um, we happened to move right into the hockey hotbed of Minnesota and kind of started to take off there. So
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
Okay, so do you remember much about hockey in Florida?
yeah, a little bit.
So
Yeah.
what is it like? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, not as much of a focus, like not many people care about it, but um, everyone plays at where like the Florida Panthers practice, so all the mites and Pee Wee and whatever, they all play there. And um, like right away, like it was just like fun. It's like 3-on-3, whatever. And then there's a lot of travel. So as you get older,
Uh-huh.
we're like squirts and we're like doing plane rides over to Boston and
Really?
Michigan and stuff like that. So,
And is that
uh,
like standard, like you're a squirt, so you go play in Boston, or is that like they're selecting kids that are going to do that?
I mean, you have to make the team, which I remember it was like I'm a mite, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, I want to play on the team, whatever. And it's like a squirt team. They're like, oh, it's a $5 tryout. Like he's not gonna make the team. Like just
Uh-huh.
throw him on there. But there's no one that plays, so I make the team.
Sure.
Now they have to play like pay for tickets to go all these places. So um,
That was a tough gamble.
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so you start out in Florida and then you come over to Minnesota.
hmm
And at what age is that?
I think I had been 7, like 7 years
Okay.
old.
And is
Yeah.
this a move for hockey or is this unrelated move?
No, I think it was my dad's job that got us here. So
Okay.
yeah, unrelated, but
Okay. And then,
positive.
so what's that transition like? Do you remember much about that?
Yeah, I remember like I come here. I mean, I want to play hockey, so we're like, let's go. Minnesota Made is like what we hear everyone's doing. Like, okay, let's go there. And I was pretty horrible, so they put me right on the bottom team, and I was like, oh, like Jesus, like this isn't gonna be good. Like I'm never gonna make it anywhere in hockey. And then they're like, well, like these people are a lot better over here. Like you got to work harder. So I like ended up doing pretty well, but um, it was definitely more of like a culture shock to see like how much people liked hockey. Like I was embarrassed to like hockey right away. Like people are like, what do you like to do? I was like, oh, I like to play soccer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was a big soccer guy, but I was like definitely more into hockey. I like never told anyone.
When you moved here,
Yeah,
because you're
because in
like
Florida
intimidated.
it's like it's weird if you're playing hockey. It's like soccer's way cooler. So
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
Okay. Okay, so um, you get into hockey, you move to Minnesota, kind of a bigger pond. Are there challenges in that like kind of squirt, peewee, bantam range that you can think of?
yeah, I'd say just like the competition right away is better, and um, not being as good, you gotta realize like you gotta work harder to be good at the sport. And obviously, I wasn't like the biggest guy at that age, and like people are like, oh, like he's never gonna grow. I'm a squirt. Like, come on. But
Sure.
it's like it makes you think. It's like, wow, like if you really want to do this, you got to work hard at it. So, um, right away, like squirt, pee wee, I'm not very good at all, and I'm you start to like get on the ice a little extra, like on the side, like you need to do extra stuff. You can't just show up to team practice on time and leave, and like that's all you do for hockey. Like you'll stay where you're at, and that's right when I realized that at about first year Pee Wee. So then I start to develop more, and things start to come my way, get some more bounces, and um, that was like when I first realized like if you want to do something with this sport, like you got to be more dialed in on it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what I'm thinking, because I have two daughters, 8 and 5 years old, and that hasn't clicked for them yet. Where like the whole work hard in order to get better
Right.
thing. So where any idea where that came from? Is that something you just noticed? Is that your parents talking to you?
I've I think that was my grandpa, honestly. Um, this was like right before he passed. He he like instilled a lot of those values in me, which was pretty cool. I've heard lots of stories about how he grew up, which was interesting. He was like kicked out of his house when he was super young, and he kind of had to um, live on his own and like make a life for himself. He grew up in Canada and moved to the U.S. Like he had, I don't know, $15 in his pocket or something
Yeah.
like that. So he was like, you really got to work hard if you want to do anything. I was like, okay, like work hard, work hard. Like that's I was just a 10-year-old kid, like okay, work hard, work
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
So
yeah.
um, that was really what I think when it clicked for me. It's like him telling me all that stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That I always talk about how, if a kid's gonna make it, you have to pull them back,
right.
right? Where if you have to push them forward,
Hmm.
I could tell you immediately, like you don't really have a chance.
Yeah,
But if you're the kind of kid that I have to pull back, which you are,
yeah,
um, then there's a chance. And so
yeah.
it's like that, almost that like unrealistic desire to work hard, or like thought
Right.
of working hard. That's kind of cool. And you learned that at a really young age. That's impressive. Okay, so you're working hard, and then you say things start to go your way. As a second year Pee Wee, things were certainly going your way in my eyes. When I saw you on
Right.
the ice, it's just like, wow, this kid can fly. What's happening like second year Pee Wee, Bantams, that kind of thing?
Second year Pee Wee was like that was when I started doing all that like extra skill stuff, and it's like all right, we're working hard, but now let's do like a little, let's have more fun with it. And I think I really started to have fun that year, kind of relax a little bit. And that year I was fortunate to win like Pee Wee Player of the Year, so that helps like confidence levels and stuff like that. So going into Bantams, I didn't really find much of a challenge there. Like it was a
Sure.
pretty easy transition for me, which was nice. Had a lot of confidence, and then that just kept building. Um, and people are starting to give you more chances. Like you come into Bantams, like a lot of people don't get like looks from coaches, stuff like that. But I was fortunate enough to just like they're like, oh, like we know who you are. We'll just set you up pretty nicely. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how soon that happens.
Hmm.
And it's like in Minnesota hockey, right around, I mean, that's when we start really looking at kids is like the Bantam age, because
Hmm.
that's, 13 years
Right.
old or so is when we think that it's appropriate to start. If you like what you're learning here, you're going to love our free Hockey Hips protocol. It's the same protocol that I've developed over the last 10 years. I use it with all my pros. It's designed to maximize the performance of your hips, to maximize the performance on ice, and to reduce your injury risk on ice. If you want this free protocol, visit us at perfectworldhockey.com/remote training. But there's a lot of information on Bantam age
Oh
kids.
yeah, there is.
It's all out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get through Bantams, and then you're playing in Minnetonka's association.
Yep.
You end up going to high school playing at Benilde.
Right.
What's that decision-making process like?
So that was like my first year bantam slash high school year. Um, that was COVID year, so everything was shut down, and there wasn't really anything going on. Like schools were shut down. We're all playing like roller hockey outside, and we're like, we all want to play hockey, right? Like rinks are open, like aren't open. Like
Yeah,
let's see what's open, and so we kind of started looking at schools. Like, is this school playing hockey? Is this school playing hockey? And it happened to be Benilde was open. They're doing in school. They're also like gonna play hockey like over in South Dakota for like a bridge league.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so worked out perfect with my classes and everything. So I started that year, like played half the year Bantam, and then once the high school season started, I played with Benilde. So right away, it was a little difficult to decide like where to go. Um, there's like there's a lot of good schools out there. Like Holy Family was a good school, Benilde's a good school, Hill Murray's a good school, and they're all kind of in the same boat. But like academically, Benilde just lined up perfectly.
Sure.
So that made it an easy decision to go there, and we met the coaches. We liked them, and then right, let's see if this works. And uh, that was a little tough to like leave the Bantam team, but like that was like a goal of mine to play high school as a freshman, and obviously I like being in school and
Yeah.
playing hockey, so it became to be an easy decision to just go to Benilde and like kind of started a new life in a way,
Yeah.
and it worked out really nicely.
So what's that first year like? That's a COVID year.
Yep.
You're playing in this bridge league. You're going from Bantam to
Hmm.
high school. That sounds like that's got to be nuts.
Yeah, it's challenging. There's a big jump from Bantam to high school that I feel like gets overlooked, and like some people make it pretty easily, but um, that bridge league really helped me with you get to play like 5 or 6 games like with all the better players in high school, basically everybody's varsity team,
Yeah.
and you get to get used to the speed of play a little bit, and then you can start your high school season. So when we started it, I'm still like the new kid, like I'm kind of weird, like no one wants to hang out with me.
Uh-huh.
And like it was a little different to get used to that and the people and like build chemistry with them, because with association hockey, like you grow up with these guys since your first second grade, like you're going like through it all with them the whole time, and then you go to the private school and everybody's new and they don't really know each other. So and then like the upperclassmen, they all know each other, so there's a little bit of an adjusting period there. But um, for me, like I found that right away, like they were pretty welcoming, which was nice. uh, but the hockey right away was they're a lot bigger, they're a lot stronger, faster, and I was fortunate enough to play against some pretty bad teams my first couple of games.
Sure.
So we got we scored like 10 goals, and I would like get a second assist or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
and it's like that builds confidence too. So um, that really helped me, and that first year was a lot of just an adjusting year, which was good to get in to the second year and beyond, because then you'd build a lot of confidence and have more success.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're talking about as a squirt, you're not as big as everybody else. you get to the
Right.
high school level, and most incoming freshmen aren't going to be as big as anybody
Right.
else, but that's going to be a theme that we see throughout your career.
Yeah.
What at this level, like, how are you dealing with that? That to me,
Hmm.
that seems like that's got to be weighing on your mind. That's got to be kind of a struggle.
Yeah, I'd say I've never been the biggest. I've always been honestly close to the smallest or the smallest. And right now, I'm definitely the smallest on my team. Probably bottom, I don't know, quarter of the league or
Sure.
whatever. And I've like kind of just grown to be comfortable with that. Like obviously, it's not easy, and there's challenges that go with it, but I can't really change it. I've realized like I can't just grow
Yeah.
overnight. I can't like work hard to grow, you know? So I'd just say like you got to be comfortable in your own body and like use the gifts that God gives you to be successful in other ways, like and find what works for you. Like I'd say if I was bigger, I wouldn't be as quick in the corners. So maybe now we work at being quicker in the corners because all these guys can't do that. Maybe that's my way of getting out of there instead of being physical because I'm not going to knock a guy down who's 6'3", 200 pounds, you know?
Hmm. That's interesting. I worked with Ryan Duncan when he was a pro, in a similar position.
Right.
Worked with Rem Pitlick when he was younger. Um, did you end up talking to those guys? Did I connect you
I
with any of those
talked to
guys?
Ryan Duncan, yeah.
Okay. But that's always seems to be like from the guys that are successful that are undersized. When you ask them about it, it's always that answer where it's like, yeah, I can't control that, so moving on.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot of guys that get really hung up, and it's like,
Hmm.
you know, what am I supposed to do? I'm not
Right.
big enough, and then they obsess about it and they
Yeah.
chase after it, and that's like the only thing. And it's like, well, we're supposed to be playing hockey. We're not
Right. Yeah.
supposed to be getting huge.
Yeah.
Like it,
Right.
you know. But that's interesting. Now, would you say that that's something that you've more come to terms with recently, or is that something that in high school you were already good with? Is that a process you've been going through?
I'd say it's been a process. Just as you get older, you mature more, you have these realizations, and I think that was one of them for sure.
And is there anything that you're like? For me, I do a ton of reading on
Hmm.
mostly stoicism and like philosophy of life and stuff like that. I know that your mom has been super helpful for me in just
Right.
talking through kind of how to live your life, how to control what you can control. Are there any resources like that that stand out to you?
Yeah, my mom's great with that and helping me out with like mentality and like that was one of them. Like you can't control this. Like let's control other things that we can and be successful in the ways that we can. And I'd say Jack Blatherwick too as another person like that. Like he kind of reminds me of you a little bit and how he's like so wired in a different way and he's he's a smart guy, so that's
Well,
a good thing.
Jack's my biggest mentor, biggest
Yeah.
influence. I take that as the highest compliment
Okay.
ever.
Good.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love Jack to
Yeah.
death.
He's awesome.
But tell me, what's the impact
Yeah.
that he had on you? That's
Um.
interesting.
Well, he always has these things, but he had a little bit of a comment not too long ago where he's like, "Hey, like, think of yourself as like a Ferrari. Like, you can take these tight turns like no one else can. Like other guys, they're like big Mack trucks, they'll tip right over, you know. So
Hmm.
it's like that. It's like, oh wait, like this could actually be like look at it as a positive that you're not as big instead of a negative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read the book The Obstacle Is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Have you read that one? I don't know if I
I
sent it
haven't
to you.
no.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
But it's based on a Marcus Aurelius quote that we have over there in the gym. And the idea, the way I would paraphrase it is like, if you look at an obstacle or a challenge or a problem long enough and hard enough and in the right light, what you'll realize is that that obstacle is actually like a blessing.
Right.
It's something that's going to help you. It might be something that, like you're saying, oh, I didn't realize that I have these other
Yeah.
qualities, right? Or it's the stimulus.
Right.
Like it's the thing that makes you change.
Yeah.
It's the thing that makes you grow. And I think that's an important way to look at life,
Hmm.
and especially for an athlete. The way I look at it is that athletics are what help you to learn those lessons because, unlike your grandpa,
Right.
a lot of the people that are listening to this aren't kicked out of their house and have
Right.
$15.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
those lessons, like
Yeah.
your grandpa learned that lesson or those lessons the hard way, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where sports is kind of like almost like a safe way for
Yeah.
us to learn those lessons. So that's why my kids in
Right.
sports. But okay, so uh, you're playing at BSM. Um, Freshman year is an adjustment year,
Yep.
and then what happens next? What are the next challenges that you run into?
So sophomore year is a pretty good year. Like, have more chemistry with the guys. We're having a pretty good year, and like we're trying to go state tournament, right? So we're doing really well, and our section just happens to be the hardest section ever,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
you got Benil, Edina, Wyzetta. Those are three top five teams playing in the same section, and only one team gets to go to state.
right.
So every year it's horrible. And actually, that year we had, uh, I think we had Cretan in our section too, which they were also a top 10 team.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So you have to beat two teams that are in the top 10 to go to the state tournament. And we're looking around like this other section, they have to win one game against like the 50th ranked team in the
Sure.
state to go play in the XL, which the XL is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Like everyone wants to be there. And we make it section final and have a pretty good game against Edina, who is unbelievable as always. And we end up losing the game, and we're like, gosh, like this is it. It's over. Now we got to watch again. Edina go to the state
Yeah,
tournament
yeah.
and do their thing, and like it's always frustrating. And then your season's over, and you're like, well, now we got to wait for next season. So like, what?
So what's that like? Like you go into that game, and obviously you go into the game
Mhm.
thinking like, this is what I need to do to win,
Right?
and you're not thinking about losing, I assume,
No,
right?
I don't think about this.
What what's that transition from? So you lose the game. What's the next like 24 hours? What's the next 2 weeks? What's the next month? What happens mentally for you?
I think especially that sophomore year, our team collectively was pretty much right away like, hey, let's get after it. Let's get going for next year. We're going to make a run at this thing because we felt like we had a great team, and we're going to have a lot of the same guys coming back for next year. So we can do something with it. But obviously, like it hurts for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like especially when you're watching the state tournament. You're like, we could have been there. We're like a goal or two away,
Mm-hmm.
and we beat all these teams from the
Sure.
other sections. So that kind of stings a little bit, and but it kind of motivates you in a way too to be like, hey, let's get at it next year and let's start working at it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Oh, that seems like a good way to use it, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
just am always interested in how people process that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't process it as well as our team did that year. Um, I was pretty happy with our team as a whole and how we all kind of got over it pretty quickly, and we were all working all summer, all spring, and we even got off to a hot start next year, which was pretty good.
Do you think that that's different if you don't think next year's chances are very good? Like if you're losing a bunch of seniors and you don't
Yeah.
think it's going to go the same way?
Yeah, I think it is. I never really had the time like an experience where we lost everybody and our team was going to be horrible.
Sure.
So we had times where we lost some good seniors. Like we lost like, Tristan Sarsland and Brady Akish and Adam Marshall, who at the time were all three really good seniors. That were like, oh, those are three really good guys we're losing. But now like we have a great goalie, we have hardworking forwards, we have skilled forwards. Like we'll be just fine. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'll grow into the roles that those guys filled, and we're gonna have a really good team again next year. But I'd say yeah, when you have a team where you're losing everybody, it's like, gosh, like what do we do now? Like it must feel like the world's coming down. Like
Yeah.
like that was our only chance, and now it's gone. Like that would be harder to get over for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that until we just talked about it. Okay, so you guys get back after it, and then this is your junior year now.
Yep.
What are the challenges that you're facing this year?
So right before the junior year, during that summer, yeah, I think it was right then. Um, we're doing the whole high performance stuff and make the team Minnesota to go to the USA camp,
Hmm.
and then right after that, I like break my collarbone.
Yeah, I remember getting a phone
Yeah,
call on that. That was
yeah. So
tough.
that was horrible because your whole summer's like just ruined,
Yeah,
basically. You can't you can't do anything with a broken collarbone.
yeah.
Yeah, you
That's one
gotta.
of the things I don't think people know enough. If you really mess up your shoulder, like
Right.
I can work around a broken foot, I can work around a broken
Hmm.
femur, I can work around anything. Your
Yeah,
shoulder is hard to work
yeah,
around.
and you're not even getting good sleep at that point.
Yeah.
Like so, that was pretty awful. And
So how's
again,
that go? I remember talking to you quite a bit during
mhm,
this time, but like you have you're on the path that you want to be
right,
at, right? You're everything's going the direction that you want it to go. And then random kind of freak incident, you get ripped off of that.
right.
Does that get to be a pretty dark time for you? Is that what's the story there?
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty frustrating for a while just to kind of like realize you can't do anything. Like, and hockey's kind of like my one thing I get to like get away from everything with, and now I don't have that. So it's like, what do I do now, and how do I overcome this mentally? And again, like I have my mom there too, who knows a pretty good amount about this stuff,
Yeah.
and she helps me through that a lot, and is like, hey, like you might not be able to do this and this, but let's go for a nice walk outside, right?
Yeah.
And so that was actually a good time for me to just really get away from everything, and kind of just reset, which you can look at that too as like that was a really big challenge, and then we got to shift mentally into how this can be a positive. So like we're not doing all the things you want to do, but maybe that's like God's way of saying you need a break right now.
Hmm.
So let's just take some time off, reset. You'll be back. You'll be able to recover fully. We're going to get you recovered fully. And then we'll be going 100% by the time the season starts. So
Yeah.
no sense in sitting and complaining about it.
So here's a question, and I think I know the answer to this, but so you learned something from that, right?
Right.
And I don't know how valuable that was. And maybe it would take a long time to figure out how valuable that was.
Right.
But if you could change it, if you could not break your collarbone, would you not break your collarbone?
No, I'd say like everything that I have once thought to be a bad thing in my life that's challenging or difficult like that, I would want all of it to stay in my life, and
Hmm.
maybe even have a little bit more, like a little bit, not, not that much, but you learn everything. You learn a lot from everything that happens. So I'd like to like keep that stuff because otherwise you don't develop as a person. I feel like.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go the other way on that.
Really.
Yeah, I thought like I could pass up that mistake
Yeah.
or that lesson and go.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't like having my collarbone broken, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, okay, so you go through that. This isn't the year that you're committing, right? This next year is
That
the
was next year.
okay.
Yeah.
So what's the
I guess I was a year off on that. So that was my going into junior year was when that happened. Because
yeah,
junior
that's
year was the
that's
year.
where we're at.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
Perfect.
So going into junior year, you break your collarbone.
Yep.
This is the summer, the revenge tour. The whole team is gearing up for junior year. And then how does junior year go?
Junior year is it's a good year. Like we all, I don't know, we're all on the same page. We were all working all summer. We start off to a hot year. Um, I feel like I'm personally doing well. I'm in like a more trusted role, and I was a captain that year, so um, that's a whole new learning experience, like how to be a captain. Um, but that was
How does
all
that go?
how to be like. I've been a captain for multiple teams before this, but high school is like a whole different thing because now people are more mature and like you got to get people to follow you in sort of a way. And it's if you try to get people to follow you, it's not going to work because like I find that they're just going to resist it. So you just have to really kind of be yourself. One is always important. And then two is lead by example. I find works the best is if they see you doing all the right things all the time, they're going to be like, we want to do that. Like,
Hmm.
let's follow that guy.
That's interesting. So the more you try, the less effective it is.
Yeah.
I've found that a lot of things in life are that way.
Yeah. Right.
um, oh, so do you meet with Spencer Nass as a captain?
Yeah, we did.
What?
All three of us as captains met with him.
So I've trained Spencer
Yeah.
forever, and he's one of my all-time favorite guys, one of my best friends
Yeah.
now. How does that go? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we met at like a Starbucks, and I don't know, he got his like mango dragon fruit drink, and
Uh-huh. Sets a tone.
yeah, and we're like, oh, geez, like this is gonna be a long one. No, but he was really good and like showing us how to work with coaches, work with players, and also push people.
Hmm.
That was our big thing that year is how do we push this person, this person, this person so we get the best out of them without like having them like fall astray from the team.
Sure.
So you want to keep everyone together and you want to push them so that you can get the best out of everybody without everyone going in different directions.
That's interesting. I've talked a ton to Spence about like
Mm-hmm.
leadership, and he's super interested in it.
Yeah.
That's why he meets with the Vanilla captains every
Right.
year.
Yeah.
And he's super interested and he's super good at it, and he's very like thoughtful and
Yeah.
intentional. That's kind of cool. Okay, so junior year you get off to a hot start, and what do you go through? Any big challenges this year?
Through junior year is like it's a similar situation with playoffs. Like again, we didn't get to the state tournament and it looked pretty similar to the year before, which was again like pretty frustrating, especially to know like this happened the
Mm-hmm.
exact same again. So after that, it's like, what do we do now, kind of thing.
Sure.
And like the answer for a lot of the time, like for me, is like this was another thing you can't really control what the score is of
Yeah.
a game. Like other players make good plays too. Like you can just kind of do your thing every time, and like that's what happens. And that's how I kind of got over the loss. Is like it's over now. Like you can't go back in time and score four more goals, right?
Right.
So it's like fine, it's over. Let's just go back and keep working on the things that we need to work on.
Is this one of those situations where you're like you're comfortable with you did everything that you could? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I feel like especially that year we felt like we were pretty good as a team, and like some bounces just didn't go our way, and we changed a lot of things up that just didn't end up working out. So
Sure. Sure.
yeah,
Okay. So junior year, now this is your last year playing at Benilde, right?
yep,
And so that's, well, I guess there's two things that happen in this summer. And this
right.
was a crazy, and didn't you get mono this summer too?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
It
this
was a
is a
mess.
crazy
Yeah,
summer.
that
So
was a crazy summer.
you decide, we'll talk about them one at a time, but you decide to go to juniors, you commit to Notre Dame. We don't have to talk about the mono thing unless that comes up. I
Yeah.
just remember being like,
Well, it
oh
was
man,
mono and hepatitis at the same time.
oh
It's
Jesus.
horrible.
I
Horrible.
remember you came in to the gym and I was like, buddy, like today is not the day.
No.
You look like
You look horrible.
you've been beat to death.
Yeah.
Like go home. Okay, so what's the decision like, that process to decide to go play juniors? Because in Minnesota, that's a loaded like
Right. Yeah.
situation?
Yeah. So that's a really tough decision. And I had a really tough decision the year before, even if I wanted to go play junior hockey or stay and play high school hockey. And ultimately we decided it was better to stay another year of high school hockey. Like, school is a big part of this too, because when you go play junior hockey or online school, it's a lot, you don't have as much time to do it. It's a lot harder to manage
Sure.
different lives, and you have to be pretty mature to be able to handle that. So I stay my junior year, and after that, I feel that it's time to go and really, like, I'm really thinking like I want to become a hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what I want to do. Junior hockey offers that. Like, Cedar Rapids offers that. I want to do that, and we're gonna do school online, and that's pretty tough to leave like all your best friends and like miss out on your senior year and whatever. But for me, it wasn't as much of a difficult decision because I really wanted to be a hockey player.
Yeah. And so you say juniors offers that. What do you think it is? What are the things that juniors offers?
I just think it's like a more professional. It's like pro hockey basically. You're playing 62 games instead of 25. So that's just right there itself is like you're going to play more hockey. You you start your season from the end of August and you go all the way up until April, May. That's also like you're playing all year round. You don't have to wait for the season to start up in late November and you're done early March probably. So
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a lot of it, and also you have all the ice, all the gym accessible to you whenever you want. So
Sure.
um, like all that together was kind of like a no brainer for me
Sure.
to pursue that.
What about like I mean, it's harder. It's a
Yeah,
higher level of play.
yeah,
What, how does that factor in? Like, how do you know you're ready for that, I guess?
yeah. I think like it's one of those things. If you know, you know. And I felt that after my junior year, I was going to be more challenged, and that was really what pushed me to go. Is like we need to be challenged right now and need to move on from this and uh, pursue something else. So you go to main camps and stuff like that, and that's where you can kind of feel it out. Like, it's not the same, but you can kind of get a sense of what's going on, who's going to be on the team, and whatnot. And at the time, I was playing pretty well against these guys. I was like this could work, and let's try this out and see what happens.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
interesting. So again, you're seeking out a challenge.
yeah,
Huh. And is that something I always ask this question in a podcast. Is that something that you're realizing now about the past, or is that in the moment in the past you were like, yeah, this is what I'm trying to
that
do?
I think I've always kind of seek challenges. Like,
Okay.
I remember I was in third grade math class, and I was in like the not so smart math class.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I want a challenge. So I went like to the teachers. I'm like, I want to be in this smart math class.
Uh-huh.
They're like, what? Like, who wants to be in this? Like, why would you want to be in this class? And I'm like, no, like, I want like give me a test. Like, I'll take a test and I'll test into this class. So I like in that time I like was testing into the class to be into the smart math class because I wanted a challenge. So
Yeah,
stuff like that is I've always kind of wanted challenges. I like find it fun to work through problems and
sure.
yeah,
So what about this as a counter argument? Like, how do you hear this? You could have stayed and maybe been more decorated, right?
right,
You could have, maybe you make it to the state tournament or
yeah.
whatever, you put up a bunch of points. That's not as important, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, I still think like that stuff is important, like individual success, team success, all that stuff. You could be recognized basically wherever you do if you do well. I probably had a higher chance of doing that in high school, but I was thinking like I'm not going to be as good of a player. Like I might have more like I don't know, fame or whatever playing in high school than I would going to the USHL, but I feel ultimately I'm going to become a better hockey player in the USHL, and I'm going to have more fun personally because it's what I want to do. So I'm going to do that.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because I don't think everybody makes that choice, but
No.
that's not that it's the wrong choice by any means.
Right.
But that's really interesting to think of it that way. So, at what it sounds so far, what I'm seeing is like everything is pointing at you have a long-term goal, like you
Yeah.
have a bigger picture
Absolutely.
in mind,
Yeah.
and so what is that, and when do you? Maybe it happens over the course of time, but
Right.
when do you remember starting to formulate with this long-term goal?
I've never really thought of it as like I'm formulating anything. I'm always like it's always going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. I've started to kind of realize the type of like person and player I am that I'm not going to be, this first round draft pick playing as an 18-year-old kid in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to work hard and go step by step, take it easy. And ultimately, like, I feel like the NHL is where I want to be. And um, if you keep working on it, you could get there. And I've always kind of said, like shoot for the moon, like you'll fall in the stars, kind
Sure,
of thing.
sure.
So we're shooting for that, and we'll see what happens. And that's another thing. Like you can't always control what happens, and there's a lot that plays into that. So I'm not too hung up on that, but I'm just kind of taking it step by step, working to be the best I can at each level, and then taking the next step. It's like for me playing like a video game. Like you're
Yeah,
doing one level, you got to complete the level before you go to the next
yeah. We talk about it as like the hockey journey.
one. Right.
Um, that's really interesting. So the I've I've had this thought for maybe a decade now, just working with high level athletes. And the idea is that you have to have two things in your head at the same time, and they're mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can't
Right.
coexist, but you have to have them in your head at the same time. Which one is you shoot for the moon,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And you're all in
Right.
on what is a pretty ostentatious
Yeah.
goal of I'm going to play
Right.
in the NHL. You're all in on it. You're confident in it. You're
Mm-hmm.
motivated to do it. You're gonna take the steps
Yeah.
necessary. You're gonna forego your
Yeah.
senior season because you want to be challenged in
Right.
juniors. Um, and at the same time, like you just said, you're not too hung up on it,
Right.
and like you don't let it control you.
Mm-hmm.
And when an adjustment needs to be made, you make the adjustment.
Yeah.
Which is like saying you have to be laser focused, and you're never going to make an adjustment and be able to make adjustments,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense.
which
But
makes
yeah.
no sense. And I was just talking to Cody, one of our trainers. We do like a mentorship thing here where we literally just walk for an hour and
Yeah.
talk. And we were talking about how the important things in life, like you have to have these two mutually exclusive things in your head at the same
Right.
time. And it seems like it shows up over and over and over.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the game. The
Yeah.
game is like, can you balance those things that can't be balanced?
Right.
And that's really interesting that you're already kind of on it, like at this stage,
Right.
which is very impressive to me. I just started thinking about that. Okay, so what about just like pressure? Are you getting pressure from people when you're making this decision?
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into that, and it can be pretty stressful at times. Like you want to make yourself happy, number one, and but you also want to make like the people around you happy because if everyone else is miserable, then you're miserable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the high school wants you to stay. Like you get a lot of pressure from Minnesota hockey in general just to stick around and like they want you to be a Minnesota high school athlete and like when you make it it's like this guy played as a senior, right?
Sure.
So there's pressure with that and then there's pressure to leave too cuz like they're like you're ready to leave. Like for them it's common sense cuz everywhere else besides Minnesota I feel like there's not as much pressure like they want you to leave almost.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little difficult dealing with that, trying to balance it so you don't make all these people mad, but also so you do what you want to do.
Sure.
Right.
So what do you do? How do you reconcile that?
I mean, you really got to like spell it out for them almost like what's happening. All the people in Minnesota, I had a lot of like conversations with different people like I care about and like, hey, like this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to pursue my goals and this. And then they become pretty supportive about it, which is nice. But right away, they just don't really understand, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like.
Oh, that's interesting. So the takeaway there is like in those situations you got to communicate.
Yeah, for sure.
Huh. I've always, not always, I've recently started to think that there's no such thing as external pressure. The only pressure that you can feel comes
Right.
from within, right?
Yeah.
So you could perceive that someone else is putting pressure on
Yeah.
you. That's still an internal pressure.
Yeah.
And and a good way to deal with that would be to go and communicate with that person,
Yeah.
talk to them. And then not only do they learn about what you're going through,
Hmm.
but you learn that they're supportive of you.
Right.
And now that what felt like an external pressure, but is actually an internal
Right.
perception of an external
Yeah.
pressure that goes away because you stop perceiving it that way.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100% because it's like you kind of got to analyze it and break it down. Like I'm stressed out right now. Why am I stressed out right now? Why am I feeling pressure? And it's like, well, I'm nervous. All these people aren't gonna like me if I leave. Like, what's gonna happen? And then you realize like they're kind of feeling stressed out too. Like, what happens if this guy leaves? Like, this is one of my best friends. Like, so then you just talk it out, and you both kind of realize like, oh, he wants to do this, this, and this. I want to do this, this, and this. Now our problem's solved. Like, no one's feeling stressed about whatever.
If you like what you learned here, you're going to love training with us. If you live near Edina, Minnesota, go to perfectworldhockey.com/consultation to set up a consultation and come on in and work with us in our gym. If you don't live close to Edina, Minnesota, go to perfectworldhockey.com/remote training to download our app and get started training at your gym with our stuff today.
What's happening between the two of us, and we can move on. And like, if it's like my best friend, like we'll leave and pick up where we left off, kind of thing. Like, it's not going to be a big thing to stress out about.
That's huge. That's the like that recognition of I'm stressed out. Why am I stressed
Yeah.
out? I don't think a lot of kids ask that question.
Right.
They're just stressed out and then it just like turns into
Yeah.
crazy behavior, right?
Right. Yeah.
But if you can identify like, hey, I'm in one right now.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that at certain steps along your career or your life, people have helped
Yeah.
point that out to you. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you seem like you're pretty stressed out.
Right.
This might be something you need to deal with. But to be able to recognize that and then address it,
Hmm.
that's that's awesome. Okay, so you also commit to Notre Dame this summer.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
what's that story like?
Committing to a college is pretty difficult because I mean, for me, I had like all these different places looking at me, and I'm visiting all these different places, and then like January 1st they can talk to you, right?
Okay,
And they can talk to you all the way up till August 1st. I think it's the same year, and then you can make a commitment, a verbal commitment. So you have all this time to talk to all these people and do your visits or whatever, and then commit on like August 1st or however long you need to make a decision. Like, some people don't talk to anybody, and it works out different for everybody. But for me, I was talking to all these schools. I get a bunch of phone calls on January 1st, and I'm like, what is going on? I
yeah,
didn't know this was going to happen at all. Like, this is like totally unexpected. And now I'm kind of freaking out. Like, you got to organize it all, put it all into one place, and kind of go through it. So I'm like making sheets of paper and like this and this, and
your
kind
pros
of,
and cons list.
yeah, pros and cons
Yeah,
list. Like, who even am I talking to right now?
sure.
So you go through that and get that organized, and then you got to do like your visits. So like they'll reach out and be like, hey, like come out and do a visit with us. And some places are nicer than others, and you kind of you see what you like, kind of thing. So for Notre Dame, they were awesome, and I go and like you see all that they have, and like everything they have is like the best, and you're like, wow, like this is awesome. But then it's like the people that work there are also the best. So that for me, like I could kind of tell right when I stepped on the campus, right when I was talking to the staff and the students that I had talked to, like this kind of feels right to me.
Sure.
And you obviously don't make a decision right away because you need to let it sit and like develop and make sure. But um, for me, looking back, I realized that that felt right away
Mm-hmm.
compared to the other places that I was looking at.
Sure.
Yeah, so um, you do the different visits, and like some go well, some don't go well. I don't know. It's just kind of how you live life. Like stuff happens, and then the difficult part was like again making a decision. It felt similar to leaving to play junior hockey and how you like don't want to piss people off, but you like
Yeah.
want to do what's best for you. So that was where a lot of my stress came from. Is like felt a little bit overwhelmed and was like, oh, I'm not going to make the right decision, whatever. And then again, you kind of break it down, analyze it. Like, why do I feel like this? It's like, well, you shouldn't feel like this. Like, you have all these places talking to you. It's like, well, yeah, like that's awesome that you have all these places talking to you, but you also have all these places
Sure.
talking to you. So,
Double-edged sword.
yeah, it is. So, um, you just ultimately like kind of find out, like, hey, Notre Dame was perfect for me. Like, I know that's going to be the place where I want to be, so let's just go there.
That is interesting that if a team reaches out to you and they offer or they want to talk to you or whatever, on the one hand, it's a great compliment
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of thing. And on the other hand, you can perceive that as pressure,
Yeah.
right? Like they're saying, hey, you should come here.
Right.
And if you say no, you're at least going to disappoint them
Right.
or let them down or
Yeah.
whatever. And there's a fine line, like you've been saying in multiple instances
Mm-hmm.
here, like you got to look out for
Yeah.
yourself. You want to look out for the people around you, the people you care about. But I didn't really think about how when somebody offers you something, it also it's kind of it's not binding, but it's
Yeah.
like it it puts you in a spot.
Yeah. That was the biggest shock I had with all this because I was thinking right away, like January 1st, like, this is awesome. This is the best thing ever. Like all these people want me. And then I'm like, a few months later, like, this is horrible that all these people want me.
Now I got to say no
Yeah.
to a bunch of people.
Yeah. Right. So, God.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. That's also one of the things that like somebody looking from the outside, because I could see
Mm-hmm.
somebody looking from the outside be like, "Oh yeah, what a big problem. You have a
Right.
bunch of schools that want you
Yeah.
to go." But it's like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is actually pretty
Yeah.
stressful. Huh. That's kind of interesting. So that's a crazy summer.
Right. Yeah.
I
That was
remember
crazy
that
summer.
summer, and I remember being like,
Yeah.
"Man, Stewie is in one. He
Right.
is
Yeah.
dealing with a lot."
Yeah.
You did an excellent job dealing with it. So, okay, so then you go and you play junior hockey, and what's that like?
And that's a whole animal. Like as junior hockey is like it's legit. It's professional. It's you got to really mature quickly, and you don't realize that. I feel like until you get there and you're there for like a decent amount of time because I had gone for a couple weeks like after the high school season before, and I've gotten like a feel for it. And even after my junior year, I played a couple games. I was like I felt like I was on the team, and then you go for like your real like season and you're like now I'm on the team. Like I
Uh-huh.
was not on the team before at
Sure.
all. So like that's with Cedar Rapids especially, I feel like everyone's held to a really high standard of like do the right thing all the time. And there's like some accountability in that, and that can be difficult to adjust to for a lot of people. And that was something that I needed to get used to right away. And like you don't really have time to like feel it out kind of thing. Like you're
Sure.
just kind of thrown into the fire, which can is honestly I think pretty good. Like it helps you to mature quickly, which is a positive, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like that's kind of what you went there for.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the play like? What's like on the ice? What are the challenges that you're seeing?
Right away, it's it's like 100% faster, stronger, smarter, and we always like joke as a team like you're not playing against a guy who's going to school for intramural volleyball anymore. You're playing against a Division 1 hockey player now.
Yeah.
So, and we also joke we're like we're not just here to play a little bit of ice hockey anymore. So, um, it's a job, and this is like your life right now. Like you need to be 100% hockey basically all the time and dialed in on this. Otherwise, like things aren't going to go your way, and you need to be focused
Yeah.
more. So with the hockey, I think it's the same as the off ices. You just need to adjust faster. Like you're thrown into the fire, and it forces you to adjust, which is nice, but it also takes time with that to get used to the speed of play and like how fast decisions are being made, and like the physicality too is brought up to another level. So you got to get used to getting hit and hitting more. So there's a lot to adjust to, but I think it went pretty well.
And is there anything, and maybe just talking through this for the last 45 minutes has stirred things up, but is there anything that you're leaning on, like you've been through that you could point to in your past where you're like, yeah, this is hard, but I've actually seen kind of this kind of thing before.
Yes and no. I'd say a lot of it is brand new. Like especially since I feel like I haven't dealt with that in a long time. So when I can relate back to it is like kind of that first year Pee Wee. Also before that, when it's hard, you don't really understand what's going on, and then you need to adjust and make different decisions. And then throughout high school, I feel like I didn't need to do that as much, so I'm like a little foreign to the concept at this point of like what is going on. This is all new. Like it's a much more defensive league than
Sure.
people know, so you have to like figure out ways to be more offensive, and then you also have to like dial in more on your defense, which I didn't realize that I needed to do as much as I did.
Okay, so did
Yeah.
it kind of expose you there?
Yeah, it did a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting. And how do you respond to that?
Honestly, I think a lot of the responses that I had was just like you need to watch more video, take more reps, like really focus in on like this little aspect of the game. So it's like it's a game within the game,
Yeah.
which I kind of had a little bit of fun with this year. But it is challenging to like make an adjustment like that you haven't really worked on in a while.
So why don't you take that personally? Because like I see a lot of guys where when they, and actually one of the first, I think the first podcast I did was with Jake Gardner, and when he went to college, he ran into the same issue as a
Really?
defenseman,
Yeah.
that he needs to play D,
Yeah.
and he kind of took it personally,
Yeah.
and I thought that was super weird. Um, and I've seen a lot of kids do that. And like obviously it worked out for guards. I've seen a lot
Mhm.
of kids where they take that kind of thing like a slap in the face and they don't do
Yeah.
well after that.
Right.
Is that's just not even something that crosses your mind?
Well, again, it's like a yes and no. Um, a little bit you take it personally, and it kind of forces you to work at it. I feel like you're like you get exposed here. It's like that's on you. Like you got to take the blame for it. So now you got to work at it to get better. And you also can't get too down on yourself because then you're going to get even worse at it.
Sure.
So you got to like find the balance in that and like how to work through it. And if you put too much stress on yourself, then you'll over obsess about it, and then you're not doing all the other things you need to do to be successful. So now you're getting worse at defense and worse at
Yeah,
offense, and
yeah.
now you're just a worse player.
Spiral.
Yeah,
Well, so maybe taking it personally is the wrong way to talk about it. Maybe what it's just like how you respond to that.
yeah,
Because you're going to take it personally
right,
in any case, but it's how you
yeah.
respond. That makes a lot of sense. Huh. Okay. So you've been away playing juniors. What's your big takeaways?
It's it's a different lifestyle. I I've had a lot of fun with it, and I mean I'll continue to have fun with it, and but you gotta have fun and work hard to
Yeah,
be successful in like the USHL, for example.
sure. What? Okay, if you could go back to any point and give yourself advice, what are you giving yourself? Or what point are you going back to? And what are you giving yourself?
I don't know if I would go back because I kind of like to figure it out on my own. So maybe just leave it honestly and like let myself figure it out the way I did. Like I could go back and give advice of like, hey, like watch out and like this is gonna be hard. Like really gonna need to like work through stuff like this and you're gonna have a lot of adversity. But like I think part of the fun with it is like having that come out of nowhere too and like, oh, like this came out of nowhere, now I gotta deal with this.
Yeah.
Like so I don't know if I'd go back and give myself advice on how to deal with stuff and
Oh, that's
continue to
interesting.
work out like
Yeah.
the way it did.
The obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's a good answer. I've not had that answer before. Well, cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you sitting down and
Yeah.
talking through all this. That was very interesting. And I hope you know this already, but I'm very impressed with you as a hockey player for sure, but as a young man,
Ah,
like times a thousand. So
stop. You're gonna make me blush.
I'll stop. I'll stop. But thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah,
Appreciate you
thank
coming
you.
on.
Thank
This
you.
has been a presentation of the PWHT podcast. If you like what you heard here, you're going to love training with us. If you live near Edina, Minnesota, schedule a consultation with us at perfectworldhockey.com/consultation. If you don't live near us and you can't train in person, you're still in luck. Go to perfectworldhockey.com/remote training to download our app. That way you can do all the same training that we do in our gym at your gym at home.